Welcome to Made It with Connor Tompkins.
All right, guys, I'm here with Boris. Boris is one of the boldest entrepreneurs I've ever met. He actually has an iPhone without a case on, so he is one of the bolder people that we have had on the pod. Boris, good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Boris, I want to talk to you about unsexy business ideas, but I also want to talk to you about the company that you were a solo founder and you exited that company. Can you tell me about that company and what that process was like for you?
Yeah, so, the two things tie together. So everyone's like, oh, what's this cool thing you're the CEO of a company, blah, blah. I'm like, no, I'm the CEO of like a cockroach company is what I would call it.
Yeah.
Right? Like nobody looks at it. It just scuttles along on the ground, prints money. It's amazing.
But it survives a nuclear blast.
Exactly. And so, what the company is, depending on the audience, they may have heard of something called Jira or Confluence.
Yeah.
Those products are made by a company called Atlassian. I spent 4 years working there on the support team. And when I was on the support team, I was like, I don't think that we're providing the level of service that customers want. Atlassian ended up increasing level of service over time. But my thesis was that given that I was working with enterprise customers and given that there was a specific performance profile of large customers that just wasn't being met at the time,
right,
that I could go and fix this performance issue, which was costing hundreds of thousands of dollars to the top 1,000 customers. And I could fix it for like 10K.
Did you work with Atlassian on this company?
No. So I quit to start this thing.
Yeah.
And I started it and I was explicitly like, I'm not going to join their partner program. I don't want anything to do with them because I don't want to be bound by the terms of the partner program.
Okay.
I was like, I don't want a non-disparagement clause. I don't want this and that. Like, I want to do whatever I want. Yeah. I was like, I'm going solo. I'm smarter than everyone.
Yeah.
Right? Like, even when I worked at Atlassian, part of why I started the company was a former boss of mine told me, he's like, I'd argue about what we should do. And, as always, like typical entrepreneur stuff, right? You're like, I know best. And they're like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
And at some point he says to me, Boris, if you know better than everyone here, just go and start a company and prove it.
And
I did. So Rick, thanks.
Shout out to you, Rick.
Yeah, sure.
All right, so we gave a shout out to Rick. Rick, thank you.
Yeah, so Rick prompted me, and then so I started the company, started getting these large enterprise customers.
What year was this?
2016, 2017? I forget. Yeah,
okay.
Somewhere around there. And started the company, started getting these big customers, started doing these short engagements. Anyways, long story short, I'm gonna compress 7 years down.
Of tears, sweat, struggle.
Yeah. I can tell you the crying stories. What happened was I ended up joining the partner program. So what the company did at the time of exit was we would resell Atlassian licenses, right? So we would come to a large organization, like megacorps, right? Like 2,000 employees plus, up to hundreds of thousands of employees. And we would sell them the licenses. We would make a percentage on that transaction. We would then sell a suite of services, so implementation, training, consulting, whatever you can imagine, and then one-off projects, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So typical services. And then we also made a whole suite of software that we would sell to those customers and others in the Atlassian ecosystem through the Atlassian marketplace.
So in business terms, you're a barnacle and a whale. Is that
fair? Yeah.
So this concept is that you have a fast-growing company like at Atlassian. They have a massive pool of customers. They're growing very fast. But you are also growing fast because you're riding this wave.
Yes. But I don't use the term barnacle because barnacles are attached to the whale pretty securely.
Okay.
Right? I always, actually, there's another gentleman in the ecosystem who gave me this idea, but I stuck with it. So Yari, thanks for this one. But he's told me, he's like, look, the big company is the whale, and you're the little fish that's eating the dirt off the whale.
Okay.
And what's going to happen is periodically the big fish will go by a rock, and you will be killed by being crushed up against that rock.
Okay.
And the fish isn't doing it because the fish wants to crush you. The fish is just being a fish and you're caught in the wrong place and wrong time, right? Which the business way of saying that is platform risk, right?
100%, you're very much dependent on this one platform. If they change something or anything, then you're in trouble.
Yes. And so for me, a lot of what led to my selling the company was that after 4 years of working at Atlassian, or 3 years, 10 months, something like that. And 6 or 7 years, I forget exactly how much of running this company. That was 11 years of being in the same platform and ecosystem and everything. And I just was emotionally tired of getting beat up by that kind of experience.
Whenever I was thinking about your exit and what you were going through, right? You're a solo founder.
Solo founder.
Did you have anyone that you were working with?
The team was about 15 to 17 people. The contractor-employee split was more of a legal distinction than anything else. So basically anyone located in the United States was an employee. Anyone located outside the United States was a contractor, just for compliance reasons. But I think we were about 17 people at the time I sold the company.
How many people were abroad versus local?
The majority were abroad.
So that's pretty good from like an outsourcing standpoint, is you were doing this pretty early at a pretty small size.
Yeah. Yeah, so 100% remote from day one, watching the current, remote and RTO and all of this debate. I'm very much anti-remote at this point. If I start another company, at least for the early, let's say, 4 to 8 hires, I would want in person.
You want them face-to-face, nose-to-nose.
I think that the goal of a startup that most people don't realize is to fail fast. Yeah. Right? Like, because you don't want to invest 10 years into something that like doesn't go anywhere, right? You really want to like move really, really, really fast and test the hardest possible thing and like fail quickly and then move on with your life if it doesn't work. And whatever you can do to accelerate that time to like, oh, this doesn't work, I need to go do something else is, I think, valuable. And I think that any forcing function that contributes to that is good.
And so that face-to-face, you essentially want more reps. You want that ability to move really, really fast to be able to learn from each other.
More reps and more contexts, right? So I think shared contact, like communication is hard, right? Like basically, the majority of modern day problems are communication problems.
Yeah, 100%.
Like we could solve like world hunger if we just agreed that like, oh, we're willing to like, shift these things around, or like it's all comms, right? So if it's comms and coordination, then you have to like look at like, where does communication work and where does communication fail? And there's like tons of research that shows that the more context that two people share, the more they're able to communicate effectively and quickly.
I mean, how much of communication is nonverbal? It's like an insane percentage, right?
Exactly.
And so you're missing that. And I think we've all sent that Slack message where we're like, I'm so sorry, like the context is wrong, and then you have to go back, and it's awkward and uncomfortable.
Tone is misunderstood, right? Yeah. Like intent is misunderstood, etc. And so I think there's that, right? And then there's also like the idea of creating, like, if I want to hire an excellent engineer, then I should optimize for someone who's an excellent engineer, right? And if we have shared context, great. If we don't, that should also be fine. And the solution isn't to be like, oh, I should hire everyone with my exact background, which, very common.
Very
but like,
monoculture.
But the solution instead should be like, let's create shared context very rapidly over time, post-hire, right?
Yeah.
And so I think even things like, let's just go out to lunch together every single day is important in saying like, now we can BS about what we did last night or that TV show or something, and that stuff creates shared context, and that stuff is highly valuable to ensuring that the Slack message, even in the same office, is given a like, well, I don't think he was trying to be a dick, right? Like, or whatever. It gives more leeway, it gives more understanding, more empathy towards one another.
There's a saying that I love, and it's that we judge ourselves by our intent and others by their actions.
Yeah, exactly.
And like, we are so hard on other people on Slack when their intention's probably good, right? So you have this remote company, you have 17 people. You scaled it for a pretty long time. And then what was, you're getting a little bit tired. Led to the decision to exit. And what led to...
So the exiting thing was interesting. Part of the downside of being a solo bootstrap founder was there was no one to hold me accountable. Right? So there was no board. There was no other investor. Like, it was all my money, all my equity, everything was on me, right? Which meant also that I could get away with doing dumb things and no one was like, hey, that's not okay. Right? And one of the, I don't know if it's a dumb thing, but one of the things I started doing was every year in August for my birthday, I would just sell the company or try to sell the company.
How often did you do this?
Every
10
year.
Years?
For like 6 years, 7 years.
That's a long time.
Yeah. So.
Happy birthday, me.
Well, no, every birthday I would kick off the process, right? But the cool thing was that it actually ended up being this forcing function of like, well, let's put the books in order. Let's make sure that I can tell the story of why we went from here to here last year and where we plan to go next year.
If you are a solo founder or you have not sold a company before, going through the process of selling the company the first time is incredibly helpful. Like, you understand how other people view you. you look at your company from the outside in, it reminds you to work on the company and not just in the company.
Yep.
So I like...
And there's also like, you just
interesting.
learn about like, the gentleman who you were interviewing before was talking about how in their company, they didn't know what like gap accounting was. For me, right, because there was this like sale process that I was kind of running, I knew what they cared about. I knew what buyers wanted very early on, right? And like, yeah, I didn't know the list of like 5,000 due diligence items that you do post LOI,
right.
But all of the pre-LOI stuff, like I was very familiar with like year after year after year.
So you do this 6 times,
Yeah.
and did you have some interest?
Yeah. So I haven't decided if I'm infamous or notorious in my ecosystem, but it's like I'm very well known for being very loud and aggressive, right? So better or worse, like there's pros and cons to it, but I basically knew all of the executives of my competitors.
Right.
And so it was very easy for me to like call someone up and be like, hey, Joe, like I'm putting it on the market. You want to talk this year?
And you're like,
right?
It must be your birthday.
Yeah, well, yeah, this was happening over and over again. And so I was kind of getting valuations and being like, oh, that's like, I'm not interested. And at the end, what ultimately happened was I got a valuation, which I thought was fine. But I think like I wrote this blog post that went semi-viral, like nerd viral, right? Front page of Hacker News, but not like anything beyond that.
That's nerd big.
Yeah, it was but it was called like I regret selling my startup, right? And one of the things that I talk about there is that like this point I made earlier, I did not have a board, I did not have advisors, I did not, have. Well, let's just to be direct, I hired really poor legal and financial representation on my side. They did such a bad job that the buyer's lawyers were like, hey, we need to help you because this is unethical for us at this point. That's always a bad sign.
Yeah, when the other team is
like, when the other team's like, hey,
let me help you with this layup, all right?
And so, like, I tried to make it very clear in that post, and people still misunderstood it, but like my acquirer has treated me exceptionally well, right? I am not the story of like, somebody came and screwed me over and treated me poorly and I didn't get my earn out. Like none of that happened. My acquirer is very, very nice. It is one of the rare stories of very kind and nice private equity people. I'm still employed there. I still do work. My team does a great job, but like, I got a bad valuation, and that's my fault, not theirs, right? They were doing their job correctly.
Was it the initial number? Was it the earnout? What led to it being the wrong number?
Earnout. It was, the problem was the thing I described was that there were 3 lines of business, right? And so it was a blended valuation on the EBITDA across all 3. And the software part was the one making all the real money, but that got the services and licenses multiple applied to it, basically.
I see.
And so it's like I can't share specific numbers, but what I can tell you is that I sold the company roughly 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And the acquirer has made more in free cash flow than the total purchase price, including equity, since then.
That is a fantastic acquisition for the private equity
Amazing.
So, were you like a single tear going down your cheek?
So last fall, I hit up the private equity guys. I was like, hey, the software part of the company doesn't line up with the rest of the business. Like, let me just buy it back, right? And I was like, and I know you're gonna like take me for a ride on it, but like, give me a fair price. I'll take out debt, I'll buy it back, and it'll be fine. And then they came back to me with a number that was almost 4x my total acquisition price.
Ooh.
18 months later for a subset of the entire business.
That stings a little bit.
Yep. And like, again, they were very polite. They like called in, they're like, look, we know this is gonna sound really rough. Like, we're not trying to be dicks. This is just what we think we can sell.
Right, and they have LPs and a board that they're accountable to. They can't just,
exactly.
Right.
So like, I'm not like upset with them or anything like that. Like, they gotta do, I played the game poorly, right? And
well,
I think
you had your first exit, right? And that's a very big deal. In this podcast, we talk a lot about that first exit and how it's different from the
The future ones will not be the same.
100% not, right? And you're a different person and a different entrepreneur now. And so you sold that business. You're still working with the private equity firm, and you talked about buying it back. Did you end up buying it back?
No, not at that price point.
So let's talk about unsexy business ideas.
Yeah.
What are some of the unsexy business ideas that are on your list? We were joking that all entrepreneurs have this list essentially of businesses that we would like to run. And so whenever we're at dinner or doing the run club, raw dog or not.
Yeah, right.
You're like, oh, there's this idea. You jot it down in this app, and then whenever you're trying to figure out what's the next thing to do, you go through the list.
Yeah, so like one of the really boring ones, I think, but is an interesting one, is that in February, Yahoo and Google said that if your email domain crosses a certain spam threshold, they'll just block all emails from your domain, right? And if you think about like the number of software companies that send emails that contain user-generated content is pretty high, right? So if you imagine, and I'm not even talking about like anything wild. What I'm talking about is like Zendesk. So you have Zendesk, right? And you're like, okay, like I'm gonna email into Zendesk, and I will put spam in there, right? Because I'm an automated spam bot, and I found your incoming email address for support tickets somewhere. So I send that to that, right? Now Zendesk is gonna send an email of that to support agent to be like, hey, this is assigned to you, please read this ticket.
And they get flagged.
And now Zendesk would get flagged for that, right?
Right.
So basically everybody that needs to send outbound emails now needs to do their own spam scoring and not send certain emails, and know how to then provide feedback to their users and administrators of, hey, you expected an email to be sent in this situation, but it wasn't, and here's why, right?
So sendability has always been a thing, but it's been sendability more of like, is this email valid, right?
Yeah.
But now you have another layer of sendability where it's like, you might go to spam purgatory and spam jail, right? And so would this be just like a layer on top of the server?
I think that there's a small business to be built here for a solopreneur. Like this is like a bootstrap thing where you just create an API, right? It literally, this should be like a very, very like simple Cloudflare worker, right? Where like, and some kind of like auth system and billing system, right? Where you then go to these companies and be like, hey, you have this like whole system, right? Like, do you guys want a spam score that you can like run every email against, right? And I will just charge you per request, and it'll be like 1/1,000,000th of a cent per test, right? And something like this. My guess is that most companies will say like, hey, I'm too smart for that. Like we can build this ourselves.
You would be surprised.
And you would be surprised.
Yeah.
I was talking with one of the guys who works on the Atlassian email like sending team. And it's like a massive team that's doing like highly, highly complex things around rate limiting and like recipient filtering.
Right.
And like all like it's a huge team basically. They're doing very, very surprising things. Like for someone like him, like I would totally encourage him to just look at what he's built and like go and build that as a service, because like that internal email infrastructure is amazing.
Cold outbound email like has gone into the gutter. Like it's brutal.
Well, forget cold outbound. I'm just talking about transactional.
Yeah.
Like cold outbound is a whole nother thing. I'm talking about like
candidly, both of them are like
it's tough.
They're buried.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to swap you. You gave an unsexy business idea.
Yep.
I'll trade you a sexy business idea.
Okay.
So I'm going to call this idea Sexy Goat. All
Okay.
right? Or Bath Bomb. And the
Bath
idea,
Bomb. Oh, we talked.
Did we talk about this on the? So guys, the pitch for Bath Bomb is I found this goat milk bath product that that has like lavender and a bunch of other stuff in it, right? And it makes your skin feel amazingly smooth, right? And if you put this in the bath and it's just you, fantastic. You have a me moment, you light some candles, you listen to Toto, like it's great, right? But if you do it with someone else, like it feels nice for you, it feels nice for them, it's a little bit of both, and so Sexy Goat is a goat milk bath product that inevitably leads to some quality time with you and your partner. So that's the pitch. The pitch is, as far as the value, is that we're solving the population crisis in Denmark and Japan. We're single-handedly creating families, generating value, creating the workforce for tomorrow and future Sexy Goat bath users.
Yeah.
And that's my sexy bath bomb idea.
Okay.
I don't know how I'm going to take it to market, though.
I went shooting a couple of weeks ago with a bunch of post-exit founders, and one of the guys in my car was a founder of a like sexy chocolate brand.
Dude, I heard, was this like TikTok famous sexy chocolate?
I forget, maybe. But he was like, he basically, I don't know the brand name and like, but I think what was interesting was I was talking with him about one of my ideas, and I was like, talking about go to market, all this stuff, right? And he was like, oh, all we did was like ads, influencers, this type of stuff. And I was like, oh, and what was like your NRR? And he was like, 0. He was like, nobody bought twice, because like the only way that you convince people to buy this is by making outrageous claims and like you can never actually meet those claims, and so nobody buys a second time.
So this guy was like, I had sexy chocolate, and then like nothing happened.
No, he grew it. He sold it for a bunch of money. But like, are we moving into like from like boring to like odd to like weird ideas? Because I have weird ones I can give you too.
I think we should bounce back and forth. I think like I also like boring, unsexy.
Okay, so mine is called Meatbags.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm sold.
And Meatbags are Zyn, but with meat instead of tobacco. Right? So you just have like a little baggie that you stuff in here and you like chew, and instead of like tobacco, and instead of buzzing, it's just meat. And so it's slowly like it gets that like the what's it called? The oral fixation people. Yeah. Right? Like it addresses all that, right?
Do you think this is like something to wean off like snuff? Like is this something like you?
No, I mean like, it could be that.
Is it like hockey players, or is it just like the everyday guy?
I think it's the person that wants a snack but is calorie conscious.
Yeah.
And it's like, because if you think about like, for example, I eat a lot of carrots and cabbage.
Yeah.
Just because it like fills me up without being a ton of calories or being unhealthy, right? And it's cheap. Super cheap, right? And I eat a lot, so it kind of doesn't work super well. But there's something psychological about like getting the calories in your mouth that like you don't actually need to eat. And I think that if you look, there's like this thing called Biltog, or I'm probably saying it wrong, but
Biltog, okay.
Biltog, I think it's like a I forget which country it's from, but it's an African beef jerky basically, but it's much tougher. Okay. And so you eat it slower. It's whatever.
When you're backpacking, it's nice. Like it's nice to have like some beef jerky that you're chewing on while you walk.
Yeah. If you think about in backpacking, the solution, the problem you're solving is I want calorie dense and light.
Right.
Right. Like that's really the problem. I mean, salt is nice too, but like
that's
really the two main things are light and calorie dense. And like here, what I'm saying is like you take calorie dense and you focus on flipping that around to saying like, oh, it just needs to provide enough flavor.
Have you made an MVP for this?
No, I was thinking about 3D printing little cages and putting meat in them, and my girlfriend got pissed at me and was like, I'm not, like, it borderline got into a fight where I was like, you have to support me on my stupid ideas. And she was like, this is really dumb.
I think it's a balance for a good spouse, right? Like you need to be supportive, and then on the other hand, you also need to be like, hey, honey,
this is really bad.
Pages that you're putting in your mouth, like, I'm not so sure about this. I had a boring idea around helping people with their property taxes, like on a recurring basis, because it's very easy to kind of understand where do they live. That process around appealing your property taxes is very straightforward. It's very legal heavy. And so like there's a room for like a solo entrepreneur to map out what that process is and the automation flows to send out the direct mail campaigns, to send out the email campaigns.
Yeah. I think this very much reminds me of what's his name, Joshua something. The like I think his company's called like Do Not Pay.
Do Not Pay.
It's like the
That's
it's
the
like
best name for a company
it's
ever.
It's like the automated thing to help you fight parking tickets and all. Basically, it's like it's.
Was this on Shark Tank or was this just?
I don't know if he was ever on Shark Tank, but he started this a long time ago, and the initial thing was that basically he had a template form that you could use to contest like parking tickets, and it won almost always. And then he built other things, and so now there's like you can like file a lawsuit against somebody in small claims court for like $5 instead of hiring, instead of having to figure it all out. And
that's huge.
So he's basically got a lot of these utility legal functions. I think it's a subscription now, so I'm not I'm not sure the value makes sense.
How many people are getting this many parking
tickets? A lot,
tickets?
and so
it's like a New York City thing.
No. When I heard about it, I was living in San Francisco. So this was like 8-9 years ago. I don't know. Like recently, he was in the news because he was the guy that tried to put an actual AI. Like he was the guy who was like, I will go to court and I will have an earbud in, and I will have ChatGPT basically telling me what to say. And the judge was like, absolutely not. Like, because he publicized it in advance. And the judge
would do that?
Anyway,
he could have done it.
So anyways, I think that was the last time he was in the news. I may be mixing up the details. I would fact check everything I've said.
This is fascinating.
But yeah, so I think it was called Do Not Pay. But same concept, right? Of automating like niche legal processes and allowing people to solve it at scale.
It's prime for it because you have a standard set of processes, right? Yep. Anything that's prime with a set series of workflows that you do that people don't normally want to do, that's time consuming, like that's
Yep.
Fantastic stuff. And so like there's also services that help you like appeal when your flight gets canceled.
Yep. Yeah. There's a ton of
like that.
those.
Yeah.
One that I've been like recently thinking about, I brought this up with Jeff actually the other day, is like there is an amazing amount of weird sports that are being quite professionally produced.
Okay.
So if you're on TikTok or Instagram, like I see this stuff popping up all the time. Maybe that's my bubble.
What are we talking about
But
here?
for example, I saw competitive drift dancing out of South Africa. I think it's South Africa. I'm like 90% sure based on accents. But the guys are drifting cars, and then a passenger is climbing out of the passenger seat and like dragging their body along the ground and doing all these dance moves while these guys are drifting cars, right?
Okay.
And it looks wild.
I had no idea this was a thing.
So there's that. And then I think in Russia, the ones I've seen are, I think one is called like M2, which is the one where they like fight with swords and stuff in like full metal armor.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah. So
I've
there's
seen
that. There's the slap fighting, right? There's the like.
Every time I see that, I think concussion.
Exactly.
Like when they're lined up and you see them get rocked and pass out.
Yeah, exactly. So, but my point is that I would bet that there is enough of this specific content out there to start a 24-hour syndicated weird sports channel.
So we're
right?
networking this, right?
Right, yeah,
Okay.
and you just be the guy that has that 24-hour weird sports feed.
Is this like a YouTube channel kind of thing?
I don't think so. I think you go like OTA with it, right? And you put ads on it, and like you just, it's like traditional
would the
media.
MVP be like using like Kick or something like that already existing?
I think that most of the current platforms would ban a lot of the content, right? Like
because it's too weird, too.
I think that some of the content would upset enough people that there would be enough moderation flags against it that it, like the automated systems, it is very hard to fight against like mass reports, right? And so I think that there would be enough stuff that enough people would object to that they would get flooded with these like mass reports, and it's like inevitably going to go viral where like somebody gets upset about something. And so I don't think like you could run your own streaming thing, right? Like I don't see any, like it's not that hard to run a streaming service.
You need a way to like pull them into your platform of drift dancing, right? Yeah. Like you need a way to hook them.
I think the way is once you become the global rights holder, right? The first thing you do is you have to become the global rights holder to enough interesting stuff, right? Then you basically need to have it available for people to consume on your own platform.
This is a sexy idea.
And then you go to influencers and you say, hey, like repost these clips. Like we will feed you clips. And all you got to do is like post your reactions. Yeah. Well, he doesn't smoke anymore, so maybe Martha Stewart would watch it.
Dude, that was a campaign. That wasn't real.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I don't follow most media or news.
Do you know the Solo Stove?
Yeah. Isn't the guy in PF now?
Yes.
Yeah, I saw that. I was like...
I think he's based out of Dallas. Okay. So Solo Stove had this campaign, which is like no smoke, right? Because they have the smokeless fire pit, right? And so they got Snoop Dogg to do this campaign of like, I stopped smoking. It was on all the PR channels, not a real thing.
Okay.
And then the CEO parted ways immediately after that. And so we weren't sure, was it because of the commercial or something else?
It's like Occam's razor, right? Simplest explanation is probably the best. Like, probably just coincidence.
Coincidence, yeah.
Or we ask in private.
Yeah, we'll loop back. But anyways, yeah, like I could definitely see Snoop like doing the animal planet Earth. Do you remember when he did that? When he was like calling the animals the wrong things?
Oh, that's amazing. That's hilarious.
Fantastic. So a sexy business idea is there's like these RC planes that take off. And so you get a field.
Yep.
You get RC plane.
I flew them as a kid.
Did you, have you seen the ones where they have virtual reality first person?
Yep.
I can kind of see that plus drone racing, but making a venue that's designed for that. So making a venue that's designed for RC planes, and it's cool. These planes like actually do dogfights and like they do a thing.
So have you seen the guys that are strapping like weapons to these? Like mock weapons to these
weapons.
Well, no, they're like mock in the sense that like they're dropping like little bombs instead of big bombs, but like they're
I didn't know they were actually dropping stuff.
Yeah,
that was virtual.
So no. Like I saw a video. These guys, they had like World War II style model airplanes, and they were like, they weren't actual bombs. What they did was they put whistles on the plane and on the bombs, and they were dive bombing these things to reproduce the sound of German dive bombers from World War II and trying to like mimic it perfectly. And I'm like, when you like dress up in the wrong outfit for a reenactment and you're really happy about it, I'm not sure if that's what we should be doing, but whatever.
But it's incredibly interesting one to see, and so I think that this could be in your network.
Yeah, definitely.
What are you going to call the network?
I don't have a name for it. This isn't a named idea. This is one of my like throwaways that I'm trying to get other people to build this. That's why I'm bringing it up.
That's the best thing about a venture studio or a family office is that you're like, hey, I have this idea, and you're like, you wait for someone to say, oh, I know the perfect person to run that, and then you're like, oh, okay.
I got a really boring one, which is like an organizational problem.
Should this be the one that we end on?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So you go to all the library systems in the United States. Okay. You get them to invest into a company. So they become equity shareholders of this company. And then they have a commitment to buy books from this company. And you've now funded essentially a publicly funded publisher that is guaranteed to sell a certain volume of books to its shareholders.
I have so many questions. Right? I mean, like libraries, I love libraries. I'm like the only one that has like a library card in my family.
Too, yeah.
But like, we're talking about physical publishing, right?
Physical and ebook. But I think ebook's the more interesting part.
Okay, but they have a share in it, so you're helping fund the public library?
No. The trick is, right? So today, a public library has some amount of dollars that they have to go and spend to acquire the IP that they consume or right? So they have to, books, music, videos, software, right? They lend a lot more than just books. Right? And so today, depending upon, it's like the physical stuff is much easier, right? Like because the laws around it are much more defined, right? Like you go, you buy a book, you can do whatever you want with it. The publisher can't stop you, right? Like you can't reproduce it, but you can lend it, you can sell it, you can do whatever you want, right? But with a digital copy, all of that goes out the door, right? It's all licensing, right? Yeah. So I consume almost all my books through digital media, whether it's audiobooks or ebooks. Thank you to New York Public Library, Brooklyn Public Library, and Bronx Public Library systems. I'm a member of all three. But every time I consume a book, the library actually has to pay another licensing fee.
Okay.
I mean, it's not quite, right? Actually, what they do is they buy it in packs and whatever. But like roughly translated, every use has a cost to the library, which if you think about how libraries are set up, that's like the exact opposite of how they're supposed to work.
Right.
Like they're supposed to spend once, reused, right?
Right.
And so like you're never going to get the big publishers to agree to give a perpetual license on these things. So like the only solution is there has to be a publisher who's financially structured in a way where they are willing to do that. So what's the thing that a publisher would need in order to do that? Well, guaranteed income. There has to be an incentive to the publisher to basically give these perpetual licenses, right? Yeah. And if they're owned by the libraries, then there's an inherent incentive to the ownerships to reduce their cost, right? So you have that. But then why does the author work with this publisher versus the other one, right? And the answer is guaranteed purchasing.
So you want reach, you want reduce risk.
Well, yeah, you basically cap the downside, right? If you look at how a publisher works, right, it's exactly the same thing as VC. The majority of books don't return anything, and a very, very small percentage return a lot more.
Do you think that there's something around self-publishing that this publisher could be a self-publishing platform potentially as well as?
Sure, but that's not the interesting part, right? The interesting part is that you can take the curation and the picking of winners and move it out of the hands of a few agents at these big publishers and into the hands of librarians, right? Because basically you'd have a preprint, you'd circulate it, right? The librarians would thumbs up, thumbs down as the equity holders in the publishing, right? It'd be like a partnership.
I like that you're re-engaging librarians, right?
Yeah,
like, that's pretty cool.
Dude, librarians are amazing. Like if whoever's listening to this if you're thinking of starting a company, especially if it's something more traditional, right? Like go to your local library and ask them like, hey, what resources do you have on like understanding like the statistical distribution of, whatever your ideal customer profile is and, incomes by zip code in blah, blah, blah. And guess what? They're literally professionally trained to do this. They are like the Like here in New York, for example, you're like, oh, I may be interested in finance. I may be an amateur interested in finance.
Right.
The branch over by, I'm forgetting the name of the branch, but it's right by the beautiful branches, diagonally across the street from it. But they have Bloomberg terminals that you can reserve and come and use a Bloomberg terminal. Fully featured, everything paid for by the library, right?
I love that you're such a big advocate for the library. I think that's awesome. And also, like, I like the counter movement. Like, the counter movement of, like, we're not sure how libraries are going to, like, progress or how they're going to change. In some cases, they need to change. Like, that they could be co-working spaces. They can be 3D printing innovation centers. And so I think that's awesome. Guys, those are the ideas that we have today. Boris, thank you so much. Where should people go to find you?
Yeah, so nothingeasyaboutthis.com.
And
it's a great acronym. It's neat.
I like that you found it. And then also, like, what about the blog article? Like, where?
So if you go to nothingeasyaboutthis.com, it's like a very basic blog.
Yeah.
So if you just scroll down, I think it's the first or second blog post, but they're literally just like line items. Very easy to find. It's called I Regret Selling My Startup. Please do not read into my like psychological health, because some people do that and they're like, oh no, I am wonderful. My life is amazing.
You're like, Boris, you need a hug.
I'm like, no. I literally had people in the like Hacker News comments. Like I tried not to respond to most of it, but like one of them was like, this guy sounds miserable. Like, is he okay? And I was like, no, I do have this regret, but like, I am still a very, very lucky and fortunate, and my life is an amazing person, right?
Boris, I think you're fantastic, and I also love that you're sharing. Like, I think that you're putting yourself out there with the blog article that you did, but also with this podcast, and you're sharing your story. So I think it goes a long way.
Yeah, and I guess if you want to message me, it's my full name on both Twitter and LinkedIn. Not that hard to find.
If you guys have an unsexy business idea for Boris, send him those.
Yeah.
Or sexy.
Or sexy. Or if you want a co-founder, let me know.
That's also a good one. All right, guys. That's the pod. Cheers.
Thank you.
That wraps up today's episode. For more inspiring stories and valuable lessons from successful entrepreneurs, be sure to listen and subscribe wherever you get podcasts. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep pushing boundaries and writing your next chapter.